What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, the podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Isaac. Isaac, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I run first of all, thank you, and everybody that's listening, and for the work that you're doing. I feel like divorce, and especially when it comes to parenting, there's nothing more important than knowledge, and knowledge processed in a calm, understanding way is really what's going to make is going to make the world a better place, and divorce a much more peaceful experience. My job, and I do this professionally, is I'm a divorce mediator. Our slogan is "Divorce is painful, the process doesn't have to be." And our whole goal is to make the experience of divorce more peaceful and more of a conversation, and having the spouses speak to each other and really figure out and decide what they want to do based on their interests, rather than putting it to a third party to decide. So as a mediator, we don't get to decide, but we're able to help keep the room peaceful, keep the process moving. And we also take a very strong focus to be able to facilitate a civil divorce, and anything else that's needed, whether it's a referral to a therapist or organization, to be able to give that full support that the couple together could just move on separately.
There's some things that popped up in my head, but we'll come back to those. I want to dive in first into what mistakes that you see. I think men in particular, but you can reference any client. But what mistakes do you see people making when they come to you and first sit down with you and start the process, or as they're going through the process?
Right. So men in specific is a very interesting topic. And I want to point this out just for understanding the point where a man realizes that they're going through a divorce. And I'm making this very general and very statistic based. So nearly 70% of divorces are initiated by the woman. Most divorces, they contemplate it for 1 to 2 years prior to the divorce. So that means that the average man going through a divorce is running, the wife has a 2-year head start about planning this out, figuring out what she wants to do, and getting ready for this for that long. When the idea is introduced to the man, he has 1 to 2 seconds. How is he going to respond to the request of a divorce? So understanding that dynamic, as well as that, in my belief, at least, and I can't say this for every case, but it takes 1 to 2 years. It's a big decision for someone to decide to get a divorce. We push ourselves not to do things that are uncomfortable, and for nobody is a divorce comfortable. So that means that there was a strain on this marriage to some extent, and we pushed ourselves when we suppressed ourselves in a marriage without addressing it. Possibly it could be addressed, but it wasn't addressed, to the point where someone's leaving the marriage. The husband may be in the position still of suppressing himself. So there's a very big gap as well in where they are and how they see it. So number one mistake, divorce, the outfall of the divorce, the reason for divorce has almost nothing to do with all the things that you're going to have to mediate or go to court or arbitrate, whatever you're going to do. They don't really have to do with what happened in the marriage. And it's almost irrelevant. Now, there are places where you could figure out how it's relevant, but it's almost irrelevant. I would say mixing up the two and putting both of them together is a mistake. The other mistake on the same point would be trying to make a settlement, thinking that it's going to help you out with your marriage, or trying to get back together and doing something that's gonna going above and beyond for settlement that's not really what you feel is just going to throw in. First of all, if it doesn't end up working out the way it was planned, then you're like, hey, why did I settle on this? Why am I going for this? Let me redo it. As well as, it's, even if it does work out, it's a relationship that's based on something that not necessarily you really meant.
Yeah, I think it can be tough to let go, right? And I think that's I let go in terms of the things that occurred. So a lot of scenarios I see, a lot. I don't know the numbers, but certainly some is, there's some cheating going on and those kinds of things. And that makes guys angry, obviously. And then they reflect on things and they sit down, they get some numbers thrown at them. And they're like, whoa, well, she didn't contribute anything. She didn't pay this. She didn't do that. And none of that, like, as you said, none of that's relevant. It doesn't matter what she paid or it's 50-50, in terms of assets in general. But it can be tough to let go of that. And I could imagine yourself probably seeing a lot of that type of, sort of hanging on, but what about this? And she did that. And it's just, unfortunately, it's a business decision essentially, right? I mean, once it gets down to sort of the brass tacks, it's really just about splitting up a business.
Right. If we could get everything out of the way, what would divorce look like without fear? I'll throw in, like, this is a little bit of, like, something to think about. Right now we're at like 50% divorce rate. What happens if we reached 100% divorce rate, that no marriage would go through full term? Everybody got divorced at some point. How would we view divorce then? What would divorce look different? Would it be, okay, I went into this marriage knowing whatever is marital is going to be split.
Right.
Would divorce look totally different? And maybe then we wouldn't pin it on whether it was the affair or whatever it was. Right. That's just something to think about, like how we would see this differently. The other point I just want to make is that we're not in a fair world. It's not that men and women are equal. It doesn't, and whoever says it does, we could go through like different examples. And I've done this in, courses that I've given. They say, yeah, everything should be split equally. I was like, okay, what happens if they have $50,000 in the bank? What should happen then? The husband worked, the wife didn't work. Right. What would you say should happen? Oh, yeah, they should split it. I was like, what happens if the husband worked, the wife didn't work, and they have $50,000 of debt? What should happen then? Oh, well, she didn't work. All of a sudden, I don't make people say this, but like all of a sudden they're starting to feel differently. A different scenario that we like to point this out on, where, we have to be in touch with our biases and understand where we're swaying is, so someone says like, yeah, everybody should have equal custody. What about a 6-year-old? What about a 5-year-old? What about a 4-year-old? What about a 6-month-old? What about a 6-day-old? Everybody has some point where they're going to say, 1 second, maybe a 6-day-old is different. Right. And that's a very important thing to always remember, that, and there are feelings on both sides and there are emotions, and who we pity more. If someone's going to say, well, we pity a man or we pity a lady the same way, it's just not true.
Yeah, there's always so many different factors in this, right? And who knows? Age is a factor. So what does that mean in terms of custody and what's best for the children? And, I could get on a soapbox. What's best for the children is people fucking work their shit out, but that doesn't happen. It's not reality, but it can be tricky, because I know for me, when everything first happened, I didn't want 50-50, just for a lot of reasons. One, I think I thought emotionally it would help because I would see her less. And maybe that did help in some regards. I also was advised by my therapist at the time and the children's therapist that because of my oldest daughter having generalized anxiety disorder, they didn't recommend like a lot of back and forth, a lot of changing of the home. So eventually I got to that point, 2.5-ish years later, we sort of slowly made the transition where I felt like it was easier on my daughter, but there are so many different factors. There's so many things to take into consideration, and I think this leads to the question of, so what do you do then? So we know some of the things not to do in terms of bringing emotions into it, trying to bring the problem into the negotiations. So what other than that, and maybe that is the main one, but what are some things that you recommend people do while engaging in mediation?
So let's use 50-50 as the example. We want as much as possible to focus on the needs and the interests rather than the position. So, let me use a different example. If I wanted to buy a car from you, you say $20,000. I say I only want to pay $18,000. Are we able to negotiate that?
Right.
So there's this line. I think it's Einstein said it. A problem's not going to be solved on the level it was created.
Right.
So on that level, you want 20,000, I want 18,000. We can't figure this out. If we go into your need for the 20,000, maybe it's for retirement, or maybe it's because you wanted to buy another car. Whatever those needs are, maybe you needed to rent a car for 3 months before you're moving someplace, and why I want to pay 18,000, right? And of course, we both know the Kelley Blue Book number. So the more we focus on what our needs are, we could come up with so many solutions. And those solutions, only the two of us know. I know why I need it for 18,000. You know why maybe I only have 18,000, but I could pay you over. I know why I needed 18,000. You know why you needed 20,000. So we need it customized to the two of us, to our situation. And the mediator is not going to have the answers. They're going to be able to work it through and customize it to us.
Right.
On the case of 50-50, nobody has their children 50% of the time. We send our kids to school. We send our kids. So we really want to focus on what type of relationship, or what am I trying to do? What type of parent do I want to show up as? Another thing that I like to tell people is like, okay, I'm older already, but I use this as an example, is like, what would my father have to do for me to spend some time with him? Regular day, regular Tuesday, what would get me to spend time with my father? I'm not interested in spending time with him. Most people my age are not really interested in, we have things to do, and that's not necessarily where we're going to go. So what would my father have to do? Maybe he would have to take me to a restaurant that I would like, or maybe he would have to take me, wherever it is that he has to do that. It's once we reach divorce, it's a place where we really get to think about life, think about how we want to show up as a parent. And this is something that married couples don't do normally. And we get this opportunity, and we could start to think whether we want 50-50, whether we want, is it weekends that we're looking for? Is it vacations? Should we start making a conscious effort to take our kids on vacations every year? What is it that we want to do? And the more we could figure that out, and the more we figure out what type of time we want to spend, sometimes maybe it's taking them out for dinner, but we don't want to do the homework and let the wife do the homework. That's important things to think about, and really recreate a new agreement that we could have over here.
Yeah, I love the idea, and I say this all the time. It's an opportunity you'll never get. I always say it in the context of working on yourself, but it's interesting to view it from parenting. But there is a complication. Well, there's lots of complication, but there's one complication to that theory, I think. And it's not that it's a bad one, and I think it's an unfortunate complication is the fact that financial. I'm not sure the word. I'm stumbling on the word here, but there are financial implications, I guess, to what you want to do, right? So if I want to be, maybe I only want every other weekend with a visit in the middle of the week because psychologists and psychiatrists say that's what's best for my child and my children based on their age. However, that costs me more financially, which is unfortunate, but it is a factor, and it's a frustrating one. Even at 50-50, I pay a substantial amount of child support. And I don't know what the answer is to any of this. I suppose it could be, and this is probably outside of sort of your realm, but you must hear these things, I would guess. I would think that they're if all things being considered at 50-50, if as long as they're not in poverty, then why should the other party pay just because they're doing better financially? Like if they're eating and there's a roof and all the basics and the staples, okay, maybe they have less toys at mom's than they do at dad's. So like that's not my fucking problem. That's her problem, right? It's her decision. If she wants to lower her quality of life to provide for them, then, maybe she doesn't buy her new fucking purse and she buys the toys for them. Right. So you can hear a little bitterness in my describing this, because I think it's kind of horseshit, but I don't know what the answer is. But I do think that the question is appropriate. And I think that the formulas that they use, at least in Pennsylvania where I'm at, are fucking stupid, for lack of a better description. But do you deal with a lot of this type of like these calculations are bullshit? Do you see a lot of that?
Yeah. This is one of the hardest things is to pay. And the viewing it as paying to the ex-spouse is heart-wrenching. It's like, why am I paying to someone that, and that's where all the feelings and all the emotions come in.
Yeah.
So first level, like reframing it, I like to put it like, and I'm going to use this, I'll just bring out another point with it also. If it's possible to have a new relationship with an ex, is it possible to have a peaceful relationship? And my opinion is yes. It's a different relationship. People could be a great father, terrible spouse, or great son, terrible father, right? We have different relationships, and an ex-spouse relationship should be something different than a spouse relationship. And we have to categorize it that way. And I like to think of it like, what would I do for the babysitter of my children, or for the teacher of my children, or for the cleaning help that I have in my house, right? Well, I would do anything for them. We need them. We need to keep them. We need to keep them happy. And, so whatever it is, and it almost would, the happier my ex-spouse would be, the happier my children would be. So that's just reframing it in a way where we're not anymore, obviously we have to deal with those emotions and deal with those, what went on. But just reframing it in a way. Now, the real answer to child support and all that. I was in a mediation training once, and they asked us if we were tasked with reimagining child support, how would we do that? And I think it's a fascinating thing to think about. Is like, what would I switch child support for? New York is a little different than what you were speaking about. Now, I'm taking this from New Jersey law. The way they categorize it in the beginning is we don't want anyone to, whatever amount of money was allocated towards the children, it's really the same other places. Whatever amount of money from a parent's income that was allocated towards the children, if they would have been married, we want that. We need to figure out what that number is. And we want that same amount, that the children should not be the ones suffering by this breakup. So each spouse is going to take some hit on the money, because we're going to have two households now, but it shouldn't be the children suffering. So the calculations go differently, whether it's if you had less money, more percentage will be allocated towards the children, or, for New York, what I could say is, one child is 17%, two children is 25%. That's a smaller break, right? It's not double 17%. So it's something to really think about. Now, the part that's switching, the part that's not real in the scenarios a lot of times, because maybe she is spending it on her purse or something like that. A lot of times in mediation, you could redo that, because you could figure out, this is generally for higher income. They would maybe split the costs that are actually for the children.
Right.
As opposed to giving money to the other spouse. That's one way that some people do it. But yeah, it is extremely painful, but remembering where the law comes from, where the idea comes from. And a lot of times there is in mediation reimagining it. So maybe a wife would want to go out and get a degree and be able to earn a higher income. And she would say, well, I need more money now, but less money in the future. I need more on the assets that I can make it through college. So there's a lot of ways how you can maneuver it. But yeah, it is painful whichever way you cut it.
Yeah, it's not fun if you're the higher earner, for sure. I don't think it's biased against men. I think it can be in that men are typically the higher earner. But if you ask Kelly Clarkson about this, I'm sure she has an opinion about it as well. I always fall back on that to push back on this notion that men are getting screwed, particularly on child support. Custody is a whole other discussion, but it's he and or she that makes more ends up getting screwed. Now, custody is a factor, at least in Pennsylvania. The amount of custody will help determine the amount you pay. But at 50-50, it's just whoever makes more. And I don't know what Pennsylvania, how they calculate it. I don't know. That's the first time I've ever heard the way you describe New York. Like it's 17%. Like it's so strange because even I've had lawyers and they're like, well, we're not, this is what way we calculate it out. But, they have their, it's like nobody knows. It's like a magical fucking box. You put numbers in and just spit some shit out. But I would love to know what it's actually truly based on. There's some stuff that popped in I wanted to touch on. I'm just curious about this one because I see it on occasion in my support group. People that are either separated but staying in the same home, or I actually seen one the other day I might have misread it, where it seemed like they were divorced but still living in the same home. Do you see any of those scenarios, and how the hell do you deal with those?
Yeah, I like that question. You're touching on a pet peeve of mine. I just want to get back to, because I know that this is a podcast for men, and I just want to point out something because I think it's something that everybody has to be aware of. Yes, it's the higher earner, but how do we look at a man that's receiving child support, and how do we look at a woman or a man that's receiving matrimony or alimony? Like right. we are not equal, and it is, everything still has, we just have to be aware, and yeah, it is what it is, Yeah. So how do we deal with couples that are still in the same house, or even contemplating divorce? And this is a very important distinction between marriage and divorce. A lot of people want to be married with a divorce agreement. They want to make sure that their husband's going to be paying the mortgage. Right. But we could work on our marriage. But how am I going to make sure that he's paying the mortgage? Right. How am I going to make sure that he always picks up the kids on time? But I don't, or the other way around is I want to get divorced, but I want to be able to come by the house whenever I have free time. I want to be able to stop by to see the children. Right. I can't guarantee that I'm going to make the payment, so this is a place where it just gets a mess. Mm-hmm. Divorce is divorce. Marriage is marriage. There is such a thing as a love agreement, but that's more like who's going to wash the dishes. And it's more of a concept than you're going to take anyone to court over that. So you can't really mix the two. But this transition period, what you could do is you could have agreements, you could have settlements, you could, and also I wouldn't be hesitant to make the agreement and to call out what it is. I don't believe in pushing cans down the road is going to solve a marriage. Everybody goes through some sort of, every marriage has ups and downs. No marriage is perfect. But there are times, when you reach the point, from that point, either something has to improve or we have to let go. But we don't want to stay in this marriage forever. And nobody's receiving a prize if you last till the end of your life in a happy marriage. You're not going to receive a prize. You may be buried together, but there's no prize at the end of life for staying. It's not a marathon. The reason you want a marriage is because you enjoy the moments, and it doesn't mean every moment, but you're enjoying the time that you're spending together. You're enjoying the life the way it is. If you're not enjoying it, make it a more enjoyable life, because you deserve it for yourself and you deserve it for your family. And that should be everybody's intention, to just have a good life. So being in that situation, you really have to be in touch with what are we trying to do? And hopefully you're working together, because if not, you'll get into a fight over the ketchup. Who has to buy new ketchup? So it's just very difficult situation, and there is no good answer unless you want to answer and you both want to answer.
Yeah, there's a deeper conversation to be had there, I think, in terms of being happy and all that kind of stuff. I totally agree with that. I think what throws me sometimes and people in general, when we have these sort of conversations, it's because the fact that women file for the majority of divorces, the fact that eat, pray, love was like a big thing, right? Go chase your happiness and, fuck everything else, right? It's if you make a commitment to someone, you work it out. Now, I'm not saying that men aren't culpable here. Do they hold space? Do they communicate effectively? No, not in a lot of cases. They don't. They need to own their shit too. It's just sad in some ways, especially if you have children. Like if you don't have children, I don't give a fuck what you do. You said your vows, it didn't work out, happy trails, see you later. But when you have children, it presents a whole, because then I think what it potentially can happen is it perpetuates issues down the road for them in numerous ways. It could be the next for their marriage, and then your grandchildren are going to feel the effects. So I think it's really complicated, and I don't know the answer. Only in that work on communication, and as men, we really need to do that as well. Maybe in some ways more so, if I'm being honest. But for women, when you get frustrated, and you have these issues, don't bury them either, and then bring them up 15 years later when you finally have had enough. But bring that shit up before then. Now, again, could be men are not holding that space to let them do that. But I think perhaps in today's world and culture, the penchant or desire to throw things away because it's hard is unfortunate, for lack of a better description. But that, again, that's a deeper conversation, perhaps for another day. So I want to shift to another conversation. Speaking of sort of like keeping the peace, so to speak, you mentioned about it's sort of your part of your task is to keep things calm. And I am sure that there are moments where that must be really, 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 really hard. How do you do that? What strategies do you take when you start seeing this kind of stuff going on, like just clashing?
So clashing in a way is a good thing. First we want to hear what everyone wants to say. And we don't want anyone to run anyone over. And we need everyone to realize that we need to hear the other person in order to be able to come to any agreement. I always take the approach of trying to portray as much as possible to the clients that they're each dependent on the other person agreeing. And in some sense, the other person is their judge. So the other person, you need to plead to the other person, not plead, not beg, but you need to put something out to the other person that they're going to accept, because if they don't accept it, you don't have a deal. So if you're going to say your honor to the other person, you're not at a place, because you need them to agree with you. It obviously does get passionate sometimes, less so than when they're in separate rooms or if you're going to speak to someone by themselves. And that's why I don't do it that way anymore. But I only have them both in the same room, as like a principle, because it stays much more calm that way. But I do have, it gets really heated, and I would just tell them either I could get up and, just walk around for a second, and then they realize, that they're paying for, maybe this is not the right place. Right. But I would tell them, I love passion.
Sure.
I love passion. I could sit here and watch this all day.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Yeah.
And I just feel bad that you guys are spending money for me to just enjoy myself. So I want this to be productive, and I owe that to you to make this a productive conversation. Do you feel like we have to continue on this topic, or there's anything that you need to say that you didn't say, or do we want to move on? Like, how do we want to deal with this? Because I don't feel like I'm doing the service to you, but by all means, if you guys want to do this, I'm here and I'm ready to watch this. Yeah. And that normally just switches it, but they realize that, it's not really going to help them.
Yeah. I can imagine there must be moments of that type of just tension. And I'm guessing you've been exposed to it enough to be able to handle it pretty adeptly. I'm
genuine about this. This is real. This is not like, I'm not just saying this. I really am genuine that this is what I want to do.
Sure.
This is what we're looking to accomplish. This is what you guys are here for. And I am genuine that I love to watch it. That's also true.
Have you ever had any agreements that you were like, man, this is just, I know you're not supposed to weigh in, but have there ever been anywhere you're like, I would never agree to this? Like, she's crazy or he's crazy. Have you ever had any of those? I know you can't say anything, but I'm just curious. Have you ever had those where you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And I'm very careful, as much as we don't weigh in necessarily, we do give the legal information to the best of our ability, just information, not advice, as well as a lot of times, and they're even encouraged to review their agreement with a lawyer that's, a mediation friendly lawyer that would tell them, this is normal, this is not normal. And if someone's agreeing to something really just out of whack, I would tell them, like, you're going to sit down with your lawyer, you're going to speak to your friend, they give you a summary at the end, you're going to go over this. This is not a process, a one-day process that you're agreeing today and it's done. What are you going to tell them? Because this is not the regular. So I don't want you to turn this on me or turn this on the situation and we're going to end up with something terrible. What are you going to tell them? I want you to be aware that you're doing something that's out of the norm. And that could be custody, that could be child support, where I've seen people that are giving so much, and we're talking about like their budget or their apartment, right. And you just have money left over for your rent. Like, you don't have any money to pay for anything beyond rent. Like, why are how is this going to work out? Now, a lot of times there are reasons that they're doing that, and potentially reasons that make sense, but they have to be able to articulate that to the next person that they're going to be speaking to. And unless they're going to be able to do that, then I wasn't a mediator, I was a manipulator. That's how they're going to frame me. And then I'm not helping anyone either. And I did have where the other spouse is like, hey, what are you doing? Like, right. They just agreed. They agreed to give me everything plus $1. Like, why are you saying this? And I tell them, look, I need to do this because my job is to get this to an agreement, a place where, and I can't just let this go through without saying something.
That brings to mind for me, lawyers. And I'm not asking you to, maybe I am, give your opinion on lawyers, but maybe not outright. Maybe I can ask it in a way. You probably don't, I'm guessing, deal with lawyers as much, right? You deal with the clients, but I'm sure there must be some interaction. Have you seen, if you had what you felt was a really good agreement, have you seen a lawyer come in and derail it? And do you think, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I guess I kind of am. Do you think that is something lawyers are adept at? And I'll leave it at that.
I'll start out. We had a day recently. I think it was National or International Be Kind to Lawyer Day.
I'm guessing they need that.
Yeah, we don't say that about anyone else. So I employ a lawyer who does our agreements when they don't have lawyers, or even if they have lawyers, a lot of times we do the agreement and then they would bring it to their lawyer to review. If you're going to hire a lawyer that's not a matrimonial lawyer or a matrimonial litigating lawyer, and you're going to ask them to tear every piece of the agreement apart, you're going to get what you asked for. And that's not, if you're not paying your lawyer and you ask a quick glance and he told you 3 comments, those 3 comments, like, those are like not really the point that we should have been commenting on. It's just that you asked him to, you asked him by the coffee shop or wherever you met him, you asked him to give you some comments in your agreement and he threw you 3 bones, right. And now get lost. Right. So it's not always fair to the lawyer, and this is their profession. This is what they're trying to do. And then we have lawyers that are not great lawyers, but are very, so they want the client that they get when they get a client, and they see the money in front of them. And, this possibly could be a client that I could take to litigation, they do see, if it's not a good lawyer, but if you're going to go to the top lawyer again, you're going to be putting down a huge retainer or something. So
Sure.
I believe in going to lawyers that could just do a review, could give their opinion, that are not contentious. And we have a few lawyers that we like to recommend to. So one of them, he runs a huge uncontested firm where they just file agreements. So he's seen what agreements look like. He knows how to file them. He can give you an honest opinion. He's going to charge you a few $100s an hour, but you'll pay that few $100s and then you'll move on. So that's a great place to go. But you have to always be in touch with who's this lawyer? What am I asking them to do? What do I expect for them to do? And use your own judgment. So let me break this down a lot more. So we give them a summary after each session, and an MOU after the final session, which has all their details, everything that they agreed in a more, not just like a summary, but like as a final, what they agreed to. They don't sign that. So, we still need to incorporate it into the agreement. I encourage them, take your summaries, take your, if you want to go to a lawyer to give you an opinion on the topic, you're going to them with 1-2 pages, your MOU 3 pages. So you have the bullet points, you have what we agreed to. If it seems wrong to them, they don't like the idea of whatever it is that you agreed on, right, that you're going to give the bedroom set. So speak to your lawyer about that. But then you get to agreement where it's a 50-page agreement. It should all be just about the technical. Like, does it say what we agreed to? But if you're going to start to negotiate over there, you're going to start marking it up about the actual agreement when we're just talking about marking it up for making sure it says what we said it's going to say. You're asking for trouble. So I always encourage them before to focus on what you're trying to do, focus on who you're taking. That would be the advice, I guess.
Well, I think we covered everything that came to mind. I think what you do, your service, I don't know sort of how widespread. I don't know if Pennsylvania doesn't. I don't know if they probably do, but it seems like it's more, especially for custody. So Pennsylvania, it's everything's separate. Custody is separate from marriage and divorce and I think alimony and all that stuff too. So I don't know if we have mediators. I'm sure maybe we do, but I know for custody, you go to conciliation and then mediation, and that's just a volunteer lawyer. I think conciliation is the same thing. It's just a volunteer lawyer, or I think lawyers in the county have to volunteer a certain amount of time or something. But I don't know that we have a service like you provide. So, which we would. Do you deal with any other states or any other states, or are you strictly, because you're in New York, you have to do New York?
I could only take responsibility, do it with a good conscience. When I do New York, I know that I know the law, the information that they're going to need. And I have very quick ways to get the resources that I need if I don't know something. We do New Jersey as well. Okay. And we work with lawyers for that, to be able to have the agreement. And we have access to lawyers that, not as quickly as New York, but we have that as well. Connecticut's a little harder, but we've done Connecticut. Okay. Pennsylvania, I've done one. Okay. Now, if there were more, would I do it in a more professional and get to know the law better? Yeah.
Sure.
There are all over. We're not very good at marketing mediators. That's not one of our skills. And part of it is because we're saying, well, we don't really know anything. We're not going to give an opinion. We're not going to, but what we do is we're focused on the conflict and how to resolve the conflict. And we're not going to be like the lawyer saying, hey, I could get you this because you called me up. What could I get you? I could get you nothing. There's nothing I could get you.
Right.
I could get you to a place where you could, so that's the difficulty in marketing and being able to put it out. And we need to do more marketing. We need to do more education, more than marketing even. It's just education to what we do. And this is where your podcast and the more people that are just going to think about divorce, just think about it. Think about the dynamic. Think about what it means. And the more we think about it, how do we deal with everything? There's no better way than sitting down with the person and having that conversation and putting our differences aside to move on. And we just want the best for our children. And like you were saying, like, we're going to change the statistics. Each couple that could go through in a peaceful way, besides for the money that they save, they're saving their children. They're being able to build a bigger, better future. And the other thing that I do want to say for people with children, there for sure is no perfect parent, but there's also showing your children how you deal with difficulty is something that not everyone gets. If a child could see that my parents were able to put the children first, even when they felt like they were right, without having to, we say put the children first, but then we try to control things that are, that means that she should do or he should do. It doesn't mean that we're going to do what's in our control and focus on what's in our control, as well as when we focus on what's in our control, that's really all we could do. We can't do anything out of our control. So I think that's something beautiful that parents have when they go through a divorce process in a peaceful way. It's really taking a difficult situation and showing their children how you deal with that.
It's as someone going through it with children, it's really hard to really truly put the kids first, and also protect your own mental health, at least in my scenario. And it's something I struggle with, and most folks know I'm a very open book. And it is something that I struggle with. I'm working on it, baby steps. She used to not be allowed to come to my house. Now she can come to the house. It's progress. I still don't really talk to her. And so I do worry about that. Am I modeling the best behavior? But I don't know what, you mentioned it earlier. I forget at what point, but you talked about changing the relationship. I don't know what this relationship looks like. I don't want her to be my friend. She's not my wife or my lover. So what classification, like, where do you, I don't know how it works. Like, I don't know the template, and I don't want to be super friendly. I don't want to be like, oh, hey, how are you? How is everything going? I don't fucking care how she's doing. I really don't. And so how do you, and this isn't a question for you, but this is what I struggle with. So, it's something I continue to work on, and I don't know the answer. I know that I do want to model the best behavior possible for my children. But I do also have to protect my mental health, right? I can't pretend to be friendly and nice if that draws me back into a certain mental state of missing the relationship. You know what I'm saying?
100% genuine is also very important. And sure. I would couple that with there's a lot of people talk about like body language and sure. how we're going to, all that. And really the best way to figure out that the body language is correct is by really, really matching to what you're supposed to be feeling. So, as a mediator, that's really what we always look at is like, are we really doing what we preach? And that's really where we have to be. And we wouldn't have to worry about our body language anymore. But being honest with the situation, that's step number one. Because if we're not honest, we're not going to get to any other place where we want to be. But then it's to figure out for yourself, that's your own. And when I say figure out and like put that goal in mind, because the temptations in the moment are always going to happen and the feelings in the moment are always going to happen. So we need to, and this is for everyone to decide, what's my goal? Where do I want to be at? Who do I really want to be? And then we need to go get there and be that, which is a process of its own and its steps of its own. But that's for you to determine what you want to be. And then we don't want to get caught in the moment, because if we just deal everything in the moment, we're going to go to, whatever's easier in the moment.
Yeah, very true. Well, Isaac, I want to thank you, my friend, for doing this. I really appreciate it. As you know, we discussed in a pre-interview, the last question that I ask everybody is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man who's just starting out his divorce process?
I think I'm going to say something different than I said in the pre-interview. I would really say you could only control the controllable. There is no guaranteed way to stay in any marriage. And forgiveness is stopping to expect a better past. So focus on what you could control. You can't hash out everything that happened. You have to, whatever it was. and you'll deal with that. Set a goal, go for that goal, what you're trying to accomplish, and don't look at yourself as a failure. And know that as a man, you're not going to have everything that women have. It's not fair. It's not even. And as much as we might want to change this, and they could look at you and see what you've done to change the face of divorce. Every step is something, but we're not going to fight City Hall as an individual. Once we're done with our situation, we could try to fight City Hall as a community. But in a personal situation, we're not going to change what child support is for our situation. On principle, we're not going to change how custody law or how people are going to view men on our situation right now. We could do it later. When we're done with it, we could go petition and all that, but it's just not worth it to try to do it on, we have to accept the rules of the game.
Agreed. Again, thank you, Isaac, for doing this. I really appreciate it. How can people find you? What's the best way to reach you and get in touch with you?
So they could find me on my website, concordmg.net. Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn with my name, Isaac Gruenebaum. They could call us if they want. The office is 845-523-9400.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Isaac. I really
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll definitely do it again sometime. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Thank you to Nick Coyle and Lifer for allowing me to use their song, Born Again, which you're hearing now and at the intro to the podcast. Thank you to Justin Dillahanty and all of my brothers at the Alpha Code. Please visit the website, risingphoenixpodcast.com, to connect with me and other like-minded men who are looking to thrive and grow after their divorce. And remember to surround yourself with people who add value to your life, who challenge you to be greater than you were yesterday, who sprinkle magic into your existence like you do to theirs. Life is not meant to be done alone. Find your tribe. Take care.